All right. Can everybody see this board display? Okay, great. And we are live. So whenever somebody is ready to call us to order.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the board meeting for March 19th to order. I can't read the agenda. I'm sorry.
So, okay, the first thing we've got on the agenda is approving the agenda, our consent agenda. I can give people a second to look at it here, and then we just need someone to move to approve the agenda.
I need a motion to approve the agenda.
This is Katie. I move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Anyone second?
Second.
A second.
Okay. And then the next thing on there is the meeting minutes from last meeting.
So I have a motion to approve the minutes from our last board meeting.
This is Sydney. A motion to approve the meeting minutes from our last meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right.
We need to vote on both of those motions, right?
You're right, Katie. We can do them together though.
I was just gonna say, I thought that's what we were waiting for.
Can someone report the vote? I don't even know who's all on the call.
I can go through. So we're going to vote in favor of passing both the agenda and the minutes, and I can go through the roll call and you guys can say aye when we go through it. So Katie,
Aye.
Sydney,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Martinique,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Miss Stroman,
Aye.
who's next for me? Hassan,
Aye.
Brandon,
Aye.
and Melissa.
Aye.
All right. Anybody I didn't call? Okay. Okay, well, if we move on here, unless somebody has another question to our leadership report, Vanette is out sick with COVID, in case anybody didn't hear that part. I know she just got back from her trip. And Alexandra has another commitment this morning. So I think this is everybody we were expecting. Oh, and Bruce is traveling for work. So. Rachel, do you want to take us off with highlights?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I don't see the slides. I see you, Kelly.
Do other people see my slides?
I can see it from about a book.
Okay, good. I was like, oh,
Oh, wait. I'm sorry. I'm going to present your people view. Okay, here we go. Good morning, everybody. I apologize. I couldn't see the slides at first, but I wanted to just go over some highlights that have been happening for maybe the last 2 months or so. Do you guys hear me good? Okay, perfect. So this year's book fair was a success. We literally sold over $6,000 in books. Of course, also erasers, pencils, little trinkets, little games that the kids wanted to go along with their book. But that is huge for us because we have never sold that many books, and a portion of the money comes back to us where we can get Scholastic bucks and buy books for our students in the various different grade levels. Black History Month, so that was also a success. We celebrated with pride. There were classroom presentations highlighting their favorite Black heroes. We had a Black History Month Spirit Week, where each day was filled with like different themes honoring Black history. And then Muffins with Math was an opportunity for parents to come in the building to share with their students. So students were able to show their parents or guardians or their loved ones what they were doing in class, what they were doing in math class, they were able to play math games together. It really was just an opportunity to bring families into the building. We used to call it muffins with moms and donuts with dads. We kind of consolidated it all and made it more neutral to muffins and math. So that was a huge success. Parents were in the building, every single classroom, just looking at how we work, how we do at Perry Street. And also a huge highlight is our parent resource room. It is fully stocked, available for use. It has Wi-Fi, food, clothing, a computer, like everything you need as a parent when you walk into this building is in the resource room. Parents go in the resource room in the morning to get food for the rest of the day or for the rest of the week. They come in and ask if they can work in here until they have to go to work. It has been a huge success, and we are so happy that we're able to provide that for families. Excuse me. We're happy we're able to provide that for families because they need it desperately. And the school is in place to do that. Also, 100% of our kids have applied to high school. We made sure that, students are applying to high-performing charter schools, other high-performing high schools, maybe one to a private school. But what we were trying to do this year is make sure that all of our kids were in a tier 1 or tier 1 equivalent high school. And so the counselors, the students all had advisors. We were in charge of making sure the students got into the best fit high school for them. And then some kids wanted to go to vocational schools, but we made sure that everyone was going to a school that was appropriate, if that makes sense. So we're super proud about that and glad that process our part of the process has come to an end. But we are very happy that all of our kids have applied and we're good to go. Sorry, I just did a lot of talking. I'm done, Kelly.
I'm muted, sorry. I wanted to say
Okay.
thank you to Brandon. He got a ton of friends to make a lot of donations to our parent resource room. So a whole bunch of our backpacks, underwear, socks, alarm clocks came from his community, and I really want to say thank you. We appreciate it.
My
Yes,
pleasure. My
absolutely.
pleasure. There's another batch that should be coming. I'm going to put together another drive because January, MLK, and then Juneteenth was the whole goal to just have these waves and these different pushes. So
Well, it is appreciated.
We really, really appreciate it. Really
and kids do
appreciate it.
too. A lot of kids come by for the weekend to grab stuff.
Mhm.
Go ahead. Sorry, Rachel, I interrupted you.
Oh, I was just going to say, I wish we could. This is not a situation where we could take pictures of what's going on, but I wish we could show you like how happy families are and how much they need to service and how they like run into those rooms to get whatever they need. I can't take a picture, but I hope you believe me when I say like the parents are so appreciative and we are so grateful.
my pleasure and honor.
And stop by and visit anybody. One of the initiatives we also really want to roll out, and then we're going to spend some time talking about our charter goals and review, which is a little less exciting, but is inviting you all to, so every Thursday we are open for parent tours, and we have it as like a drop-in time on our website, and we wanted to encourage any board members who are interested. So I'm going to send out an invite after this meeting. We talked about it at our governance meeting. Just knowing that like we have our assistant principals available every Thursday morning so that anybody at any grade level could pop by for a visit. It's particularly for prospective parents, but sometimes our current families come. And we would love for board members to know that's a great time. If you have time one Thursday morning to stop by, visit classrooms, check out the parent resource room, or do whatever you're interested in. Okay, so what we want to make sure, we talked a little bit about this before, we are coming very close to two upcoming events. One is that the PCSB more broadly is bringing before their board the Aspire framework, which is going to be replacing the PMF or the Performance Management Framework. And so that is in tandem happening at the same time. Our charters is being reviewed. And so we're going to talk a little bit about our charter, but then in the context of what's happening next in terms of accountability in the public charter sector. So feel free to interrupt me and ask questions, but I'm going to go through these slides pretty continuously. So we are currently, what applies to our charter review that's coming up on May 20th, and we'll get our report on April 26th, but on May 20th, what they're looking at are the public charter transitional goals. That's what we'll be held accountable to, because this has been such a crazy, weird time. And there were initially pandemic goals, and then they transitioned them into transitional goals while they rolled out this new Aspire framework. So the Aspire framework is not what we will be held accountable for, but it will be what is rolled into place in the next couple years. So we just wanted to make sure people understood what they're talking about when we get into our charter renewal. The reality is there was no data for them to measure us against for 20 and 21, which was like the first year of the 5 years. The next year there was baseline data collected. So for MAP and for what was Park and is now changing. And then what the pathways that are fully in place then are pathway B, C, and D. And this is a lot of information. It's on the live binder to go back and look at, but we want to make sure people relatively understand there's a lot of different ways now that the Public Charter School Board is trying to hold schools accountable and create some flexibility for showing that you are either a school that is performing high or improving significantly. So pathway B is that you are meeting or exceeding the state average in every single one of the domains, and we'll look at what those domains are, or you're demonstrating improvement in every category from 21 and 22. We have 2 domains where we had pretty steady progress, and so we do not meet pathway B technically in every single domain, but we meet both C and D in terms of showing that we have met charter school goals. So we exceeded both the publisher growth criteria for MAP in all areas, and that's pathway C. And additionally, we showed improvement in all of those same domains from the publisher. Pathway D is another way that we've met the charter goals, which is that we earned higher than a 40% on OSSE's STAR framework. So we got a 45 last year at the end of 22-23, or we just got it this year. But a 45 is the score that we got. The way that you meet their goals is by getting a 40 or higher. And that's for them what a level 2 is. So our charter review, she's got these dates on it, May 20th. We have met the charter goals, and that's what we kind of just want to be really clear that everybody understands. They still might want to come in and talk about questions, concerns, what these last 5 years have looked like for our school. But we have met the goals on 2 different pathways from their perspective. So again, this just gives you the review. In 18-19, we hit tier 1 on the prior PMF. 19-20, we don't have any data. 20-21, they don't have any validated data. 21-22 is baseline data they took for just MAP, and the last time we were taking Park. 22-23, we evidence that we met those goals. This is more details on this, so it spells out a little bit more what pathway C is. If you guys see my cursor over here, pathway C is showing that on NWEA MAP. So that's the assessment we take 3 times a year. The median growth percentile is a 50, and what we demonstrated in 22-23, so last school year, was a 57 and a 52. So that means that that is the percent of our kids who are above the median percentile. It's kind of a percentage of a percentile, which is confusing. I always like say it slowly just to make sure I'm processing it. And then on the bottom here is pathway D, which shows our summative score of 45 when the target score was a 40. What will happen after this year is Aspire. So Aspire is what they're calling their new performance management framework, or their charter goal tool. And we're going to look at that a little bit more closely now too. So this is not yet onto the performance framework. This is actually just where we are this year. So let me back up a little bit. Where we are this year with our indicators. So this is year 23-24. This is our target to meet either pathway C or pathway C2. And basically, we don't know yet, but we have every reason to believe we will meet both pathways at the end of this school year. They'll probably ask us that during the charter review. They're saying, what data do you have to indicate that you continue to meet charter goals? And we have all the indications, which is how our students are doing on MAP right now. That gives them a projected Park score, our in-seat attendance, our re-enrollment rates, our class scores. So class is going on right now, which is when evaluators come in and observe in our pre-K classrooms. This is our class week right now. And then our median scores. So these scores that they've included right here, 62 and 57, those are our winter scores. So as of the winter, we are already well exceeding the 50 benchmark that we're trying to get to. Okay, does anybody have questions about this year right now and anything of where we're on track or not sure about yet? No? Okay. So now we're on to Aspire. Sorry, I had one more slide in there I didn't realize. So Aspire replaces the PMF. It is open for public comment right now, which means at the board meeting that was last night and the board meeting that is next month, people can go in and speak for, against, they can express concerns, they can express whether or not they think that changes should be made before there's a public charter school vote on the new framework. One of the things that's difficult is that they haven't set floors and targets yet. So we don't know how we'll be rated within the Aspire framework. So we understand what categories there will be, but we don't know what the baseline and what the target data will be for us to hit in order to get our full points on the Aspire framework. Next year will be the first full year of it. This year we're data piloting. So this year what happens so they've now rebranded PARC as CAPE. It's actually the same test, but it is no longer called PARC because there are no other consortium of schools taking PARC in the same way that there used to be. So what we'll be able to see pretty much in the summer or fall when we get those CAPE scores is how we would do on the Aspire framework when it actually matters the following year. This is how you're comparing the points. And this is what's really important, particularly in the PCSB messaging, is that they've increased the amount of points schools get for growth. So instead of simply having it be academic achievement, we have double the points than we used to for growth now. And there's a couple different ways that they're measuring that growth. And we get to measure growth on our school-based assessments, which for us is MAP, in addition to CAPE, which is the state standardized test we take with secure measures. But there's not a ton of differences. And that's the other thing we just kind of want to note. I was speaking with Alexandra yesterday, and 10 Square has done a really full analysis of how schools score on the PMF versus Aspire. There's not much change. So they spent about 2 to 3 years developing this. And what we see is a pretty similar framework in terms of outcomes. Now, there are some major differences, and that's subgroups. So weights are based on subgroups, number 2 right here. And what that means is that unlike before, it's not all just an all students bucket, but what you'll see is certain points for certain subgroups of students. And I've got some of these subgroups right here. So the Aspire framework gives 40% for economically disadvantaged students, 20% for non-economically disadvantaged students, 15% for students with disabilities, and 10% for English language learners. The race and ethnicity categories are divided equally amongst 15%. So this is good for a school like ours, that we do see different outcomes, unfortunately, but we have to acknowledge it. There are different outcomes for different subgroups. We have very, very large proportion of students who are in subgroups that are often lower performing. And this gives us more credit for the growth that they're making at a school like ours. Brandon, what's your question?
Okay, I unmuted myself. Is the threshold for economically disadvantaged? I know it was free or reduced lunch, but if memory serves, didn't they remove that to where everybody has access to that? So what's the threshold that determines the economically at risk?
Yeah, there's 2 good points to your question. One is 100% of our kids do receive free lunch at Perry Street, but that's not across the district anymore. It was something they put in place during the pandemic. And I want to be honest, like I'm a huge proponent for it. So if anybody ever asks you, I think it's something good to know about, that like kids are not being provided meals for free anymore at all schools in DC. So charter schools might choose to do that, but there's not legislation protecting the funding from the federal government for that any longer. But you're right, because we kind of messed up how we categorize those people, that's not how we could use this determination for economically disadvantaged. What happens now is that we get data from the state, and any student whose family qualifies for food stamps, cash assistance, Social Security, is in foster care, and is homeless, is who gets categorized as economically disadvantaged. So now it is exclusively based on state benefits and housing status.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And so for a school like ours, you can see on here 68% of our students are currently qualifying as that. What a lot of schools have concerns about is particularly in like the new to US population and migrant populations, there's a lot of fear around getting those benefits. So oftentimes those students should be categorized as economically disadvantaged, but are not. So it's one of those other like advocacy pieces that's just good to know about. Okay.
Julie, you have a note about how students get counted across multiple groups.
Oh, yeah.
Can you?
Yeah, so
go ahead. You're going to answer my question.
No. Thank you for bringing it up. I was kind of ready to move on, but it is a really good point to know. And I think for us and our belief that like our most vulnerable students should be the most important, it's great. But a student could be categorized as economically disadvantaged. They could count in that 40% of the points. They can count in the Black or African American percentage of the points. They can count in the student as a disability. They could also be an English language learner. So a student could effectively count in 4 of those point categories. One student could, or often students are going to count in at least a couple of them. So our most vulnerable students are going to be the most weighted in this.
Thank you.
Thanks for noticing that. There's a lot of nuances to this, and there's a lot of concerns, right? Like I would say, like in general, I think that the motivation and the assessment is coming from a place that we support, which is making sure that schools who have high percentages of economically disadvantaged students aren't just automatically doing worse on this frameworks, which is what was happening previously. There was a very high correlation. With that said, there are still some concerns about them resetting subgroups, floors and targets differently. So it does lower student expectations. And I'll just say, like, that is one perspective that I think is really concerning about the Aspire framework and the way that they've done these subgroups, is that we are openly lowering expectations for students in different subgroups. It's something you'll hear about in the public comment if you go to the public charter school board public comment sections. Basically, the big change they made is that there's now 5 levels instead of 3 levels between the PMF and the Aspire framework. We are setting or the state is setting the floor and targets this time. So they're going to use whatever OSCE floor and targets get sent instead of the public charter school board coming up with their own. There's some nuanced changes to attendance. So instead of in-seat attendance, we're actually evaluating chronic absenteeism. So we're kind of doing the inverse. Instead of saying like, well, how many kids do you have coming all the time? It's how many kids do you have not coming at a high frequency? Aspire, the big change that's going to impact us a lot is right here, the 1, 2, 3, 4th category down, which is that previously, the PMF included a large percentage of points for kids who got 3+ and then kids who got 4+. They have removed 3+ as a point attaining category. So only kids who are getting 4+ on this assessment get points. And that's a really high categorization, especially when we've got a lot of kids we got to move out of level 1. Getting them to level 4 is going to take a lot of years. And so, there are a lot of growth points we can get for kids who are going from level 1 to level 3, level 1 to level 2, but we have historically had pretty low percentages in that 4+ category. And that's our work right now, right, Rachel? Every day they're like, how are we going to get more kids into 4+?
Yeah, I was going to
Well,
ask.
now that Sydney asked the question, I'm thinking in my head, we need to identify all the kids who are in all 4
In every
categories,
group.
literally, and start focusing our efforts towards making sure the kids who are in all 4 categories are solid on CAPE. Because that may not, just have my brain thinking.
Yeah, I was going to ask the two of you to share, if you're far enough along, what those discussions look like inside Perry Street, right? Around how do we maximize our 4+ scores? Adjustment, any adjustments have you guys discussed yet, or strategic approaches?
Yeah, we were going to talk about it a
Yep,
little bit more
so-
during the academic committee, but go for it, Rachel. Talk about your plan.
So that's happening right now. We had our recent math test we took in the winter. We looked at that data to figure out what our hot spots were. The good news is we did excellent in math. The median is 50%. We were at 67% in K-2. We were about at 64% in middle school. So we went above for math in both K-2 and middle school. Now, that is what we were focused on, and that has been the push since the beginning of the school year. In the last board meeting, we talked about it as well because we got dinged in math last year because we were down teachers. This year, we're not. Now, what we're focusing on now, though, is second grade ELA because we saw that there was a serious deficit of second grade ELA after the winter math test, and then also 2 more ELA classes, fifth grade ELA, and then fourth grade ELA. While the math teachers are still one of our number one priorities, we have switched gears a little bit. We put kids in different groups because right now every child has a regular ELA class and a lab class, which is a small group. So we rearranged our small groups based on the winter dates to figure out if we're able to move the needle and respond to the data appropriately. So that's where we are right now. If you come to the building, what you'll see is like students in small groups all over the building, learning based on what they need, not based on what the whole school needs, if that makes sense. So we're working hard still, trying to get the scores up in math and ELA, and trying to get us to where kids are getting 4s on PARCC. And like Kelly said, we're getting kids who are coming to us 4 grade levels behind. And our goal for that child is to grow them and grow them and grow them until they can hit that 4+ mark. And so but we do understand that takes some time.
Sure.
But in the meantime, we have a plan in place with the small groups to figure out how we're going to increase second grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade achievement, because those were the 3 hotspots where they did not meet the 50, the average for ELA.
Okay. Thank you.
Got our work cut out for us.
But now for PARCC, Sydney, I think I'm going to pull those kids into 4 different categories, identify the list, and make that another
You
focus.
should. I mean, if they're going to make it a game like that, then you kind of have to, you have to maximize it.
Absolutely.
So what's important also to know about this Aspire framework is the different levels. So we were saying PMF used to have 3 tiers, right? It was tier 3, tier 2, tier 1. We were so excited to get up to tier 1. Now there's 5 tiers. And the majority of schools are living in level 3 in their initial data modeling. But what is good to know is that and what people are talking a lot about during public comment is that they've attached some other consequences to these levels when there used to not be. So in order to replicate, expand, or otherwise grow, you have to be in level 1. And that's a big change that we used to not have. It used to be that anyone could request or ask about how they could expand, and now there's some pretty strict requirements around it. Level 2 is you could be eligible. Level 3 is satisfactory performance. And again, that's where I said, like when they did the data modeling, the majority of schools are right now in level 3. This is somewhere in between where you're saying like you are meeting state averages, you are showing growth every year, but you're not in that exemplary category where you're getting the vast majority of your kids, particularly like in a level 4 on PARCC/CAPE. We got to get this new name is going to be tricky for everybody. Level 4 and level 5 is very different. So we never previously had consequences that went along with these 2, but there is now high stakes review attached to those levels. So level 5 means they could immediately bring you into a review to potentially revoke your charter. Now I can be the first person to say like, oh yeah, that makes sense. A school performing like that should be immediately up for reconsideration. But if you think about our story, that's an important thing to think about. Perry Street Prep was a tier 3 school. And very quickly, the board took action to say like, no, we want to make big changes, but it's going to take us a few years. And it did. It took us a few years to get from level 3 to tier 1. And so 5-year increments, like used to be the standard, are now down to 1 year, right? You've got 1 year, really. Every year matters in terms of not making sure that you're not at the bottom. So I understand that for kids, but I know as an organization that's been through this and it took some time to recover, it's concerning. And just so people know, like in the initial modeling right now, we are in the high part of level 3. So that data hasn't been validated. We haven't gotten to see the calculator, but they have released for everybody where they would fall with their prior year's data. And I want you guys to rest assured that we're in a place that we know we can push really hard still, and we have a lot of room for growth, but we don't have any concerns about where we fall on the current Aspire. This is our mid-year data. So you all should have gotten an email from the Public Charter School Board. And if anyone didn't, I actually want you to let me know because I want to check email addresses with them. But they do a mid-year data that goes out. It says PCSB board. It looks like a very generic email address that it comes to you all in with an Ignite. I see it nodding from Sydney. So someone got it. Good. And what it's got is like 5 pages of snapshots, and it's great. It's so boards can hold schools accountable, right? But we also want to make sure you all know that we all know this data collectively as a group. It's showing us what our current enrollment is. It's showing us what in-seat attendance is. I will say in-seat attendance for us right now is a work in progress. We have implemented a new process this year where teachers are taking attendance every block, which is great because it helps us know dosage for intervention services. It helps us find out if kids are consistently getting dismissed early. But teachers are having trouble also filling in homeroom attendance. So we are doing a lot of reconciling for block attendance and homeroom attendance. So this 87.8 still has a lot of blank attendance in it. So I just want you to all know that that's not really where we think we are right now. Our chronic absenteeism has gone down from last year, which is great, and our truancy has gone down. So we do see a big improvement, particularly with some of our students who are habitually absent, and we're seeing an improvement in those numbers, which is awesome, and we're really excited about. Mid-year withdrawal rate is down this year too, which is great. So we were at 5.1% last year this time, and we're at 3.3% this year. We know every one of those 15 students. We know why they've moved. We know where they've gone. A lot of it is just mobility issues in terms of kids moving to different places of the city, making choices that are more convenient for their family, or moving out of state. Our suspension and expulsion rates are still at 0.
Hey, Kelly?
Mhm.
Are the absentee rates and the truancy rates, how do they compare to the rates that were, how those numbers were collected pre-pandemic? Like, are these numbers higher on the whole?
Yes, they're still a lot higher than they were. So our truancy rate, which is truancy just means students have 10 or more unexcused absences. I think we were at 7% pre-pandemic. So we just see a much larger amount of kids who are missing larger portions of the day. I think people's threshold for keeping kids out of school has changed. I'll just say that. I was struggling with the correlation there. Has changed. So if kids are a little bit sick, they stay home. It has also been harder, at least parents are reporting to us, to get to doctors. And so they are, a family that's taking public transportation to go for a checkup is probably going to miss the whole day of school. A family that has a car and can have private insurance and schedule their appointment for 8 a.m. is only going to miss 1 block of the day. And that's where we see a big difference for a lot of our kiddos. And then we've just got families that are moving all the time. I just talked to a mom the other day that was like, we're not going to be in school today because we're going to try to go down to the diaper bank and get formula and diapers. That's going to take them the whole day. And, I just want to be realistic. I think we don't think attendance or there is a common thought that all kids can get to school. And we just want to acknowledge there are a ton of barriers for our kids to get to school. But they were doing better before. So Katie, that's, a good point, right? We had lower rates pre-pandemic. We also had a very different population. Only 52% of our kids, or 51%, I think, prior to the pandemic, were economically disadvantaged. And we now have 68%. So our school community has changed. Do we have any other questions about framework data before we move on? No? Okay. If anyone sees something in the chat, let me know too, because I see chats about the email. Okay, I'm going to check your guys' email address afterwards then. Thank you. I'll also just forward
Yeah,
everyone the email.
LEA has all the old email, like current people, but then it has like Miss Brandel and all them. So I think all the new people that we voted on need to be added.
So they're in our contacts. It means I have to get PCSB to update the contacts they're using,
I figured, yeah.
which happens a lot. Like we have to go into this thing called the hub and update all of you guys. And I know that you're all in there, but often they're not updating mailing lists. So I will make sure that we ping that we're using updated mailing lists. So thank you, Sydney, for checking.
No problem.
Okay. In terms of moving into operations and finance, we do not have any new contracts up right now, but we are going to very quickly be moving into that season of the school year. But so no renewals and no new contracts above 25K. We will be going out to bid for our food service management company because we're at 3 years. And most summers we reconsider our special education related services. And those are mostly because there's such huge cost items in our budget, but also because there's a lot of competition out there for contracts that we can use. We are in enrollment season right now. So April 1st is the first day that our families can complete re-enrollment and do their proof of residency. So it's also as soon as we get all of our matches from the lottery. So our matches were or our applications were up, not as much as we like, but they were up 6% from last year. And we also saw an increase in our top 3 families, and that's a great indicator for us. So in addition to applying, more people are saying they want to come here as a top choice. We will continue to have people apply to our school and enroll all through the summer. Like we have always left enrollment open that long. But we will get our highest threshold of enrollment happens from April 1st to May 1st. And that's when the city says we're allowed to start doing it for next school year. So our finance committee met yesterday, and we are starting to talk about our budget. We do not yet have a draft. We work with EdOps on that in their worksheet, but we did just get numbers from the mayor. They're proposing a 12.4% UPSFF, which is so per student enrolled at the school, we'll get an increase from last year to this year of 12.4%. That is the largest there's ever been, but there still are concerns about whether or not that 12.4% can cover the incredible increase that we had in educator pay this year. So passed as a separate DC Council legislation last year, they put a huge infusion for schools to increase teacher pay scales and then use excess funds to pay retention. And then we increased our instructional aid pay scale and our assistant principal pay scale. There are some concerns that maintaining those higher levels is going to be difficult with the amount of increase that we've gotten. And it is quite the chatter right now. Additionally, we have now officially this school year will have exhausted 100% of the pandemic infusion funding. So we had a lot of funds as a Title I school that came in from the federal government during the pandemic, and we have now exhausted all of those funds. We use them exclusively for staffing. So we had expanded staffing during that time, and now we're just trying to figure out how to maintain levels. In some places, we will see class sizes going up, not largely, and we're still going to be below the average, but that's going to be one of the changes that we make internally to manage this decrease in funding, is that instead of where we had 3 cohorts and classes of 15, we'll look more at 2 cohorts with classes of 21. And it's not that direct across the board, but that's going to be more what our average class size is, most likely in what we're proposing right now. We will let you guys know as soon as we have a draft. I hear a question, I think.
Go ahead. Nope, finish.
Okay. I was going to say, as soon as we have a draft, the finance committee will be meeting again to discuss it. And at our next board meeting, there'll be a budget proposal brought to the board. A lot happens behind the scenes, just so everybody knows. We have all of our assistant principals involved in our staffing right now and our needs across the school, and we will really be building it from the bottom up. We won't plan for any large investment right now until we really know that we can manage these increased educator pay. Did you want to chime in with a question about the budget?
Sure. When you talk about increased costs, salary, facilities, and resources is probably a bit of a bucket for what types of things?
Yeah, so we've just seen costs go up across the board, right? We see costs going up for occupancy. So like our janitorial, as companies are adjusting to the increase in minimum wage, they are all charging a lot more. And they pass those costs along to us in all different ways. A lot of that is just in our maintenance, staffing, our HVAC costs have gone up. And that doesn't mean our repairs are down, but we see the costs from all those companies going up. Additionally, we saw an increase in cost in every one of our curricular materials this year. Some years those are pretty steady, but we're definitely seeing an increase that I think a lot of people are feeling in all different ways. A lot of companies also really tried to hold prices steady for us, for schools like ours that really continued to make business consistent for them over the pandemic. But now they're kind of saying like, we can't keep these prices steady. We have to increase. Our food prices went up last year pretty dramatically, and like they really showed us across the board where their costs are going up, both for food and for staffing. So I don't think it's anything astronomical. I do think we're going to be able to balance our budget, but we are trying to be realistic that we see costs going up. We don't see funding going up as steeply as we see costs going up, and we're just going to have to be prudent. The good news is we've been in a great financial position. We have excess cash on hand every year. We've been able to make some big investments in technology and in bathrooms and in our facility. And we might just for a couple of years while we right size here, be holding off on some of those larger investments.
Have we considered at all like corporate partner relationships that could subsidize some of the non-facilities related things, but some things on the resource side? And I specify corporate partnerships because they tend to be, large, like individual fundraising can feel like a drip. Corporate partnerships could tend to be more manageable lump sums that make impact more significantly.
Yeah,
over time.
I don't have a lot of experience with that. I think bringing that to the table would be great. We do a lot of grant writing and private foundation grant writing, and that's really what the school is doing. I know that some people have had corporate matching for donations that they've made, but it really only is matching. It's not lump sum giving. But yeah, if anybody has connections to corporations that they know do that sort of work, we have gotten a lot of in-kind donations. So all of our legal services are donated by Ballard Stabar. There has been some large Greek organization like giving to us in terms of service. So they've done painting and organizing for us over MLK Day. But I don't know what corporate giving would look like otherwise for a school. So definitely interested.
Sure. Yep. Thank you for that.
So this is ongoing, what we just talked about. Budget is underway. Our 990, which is our annual tax form that follows our audit, has now been submitted and complete. And what we've been spending some time from the finance perspective as is responding also to this charter renewal. So we just want, people to know they don't just look at those goals. They also look at our finances, our operations, our feedback that they get from surveys. So they've been asking a lot of questions from us as a school. I think partially it's because they see a lot of schools in financial duress following the pandemic. But we don't have any indicators of that. They just want us to explain a lot of the variances they see from prior year audits to our current year budget. And so we've been having a lot of back and forth with them, but no big questions or concerns in terms of the charter renewal from our financial perspective. Anyone else on the finance committee who is there? I'm doing all the talking, but have anything they want to share?
No, I think you've got it.
Okay. Our academic committee is meeting following this, so I think they'll have an update for everybody next time, unless there's anything anyone wants to share. Okay, and then our governance committee has been meeting. Sydney, do you want to take over that?
Sure. We usually meet halfway through between these meetings. So we met a few weeks ago. And we have one specific ask in terms of action items, and then some other deliverables that will be available for your review. We met to update what we're calling the trustee skills matrix, which is really an Excel spreadsheet that tracks everyone's tenure, but now we've added kind of skills areas where we want to be able to track where people have expertise or are comfortable contributing. so that as we work on our succession planning / recruiting, we're being strategic and targeted in who we reach out to and who we bring on board long term. So look for that to go out shortly following this meeting. We are in the process of launching a new trustee onboarding training. Lots of INGs in there. That is currently documented, and we are pretty close to a final draft. That will really just govern the governance process around onboarding. And then the recruitment process and trustee expectations are documents that I will share for you all's review following this meeting as well. Again, a big push from our committee following our last kind of retreat was really documenting our processes, starting to build some long-term kind of reference materials that will govern from term to term, from leader to leader, et cetera. So we're really just taking the time to put things on paper as we have some of our veteran trustees preparing to roll off in the Vanette Cindy camp. So those will be available for review. I will send out the trustee skills matrix. I'll ask that you spend literally 15 seconds going through them and putting an X in the box where you feel good about your skill set or your willingness to contribute. And that's it for governance this month.
We do have an option for a closed session, Sydney, if we wanted to vote or propose the parent trustee.
Great, we should. I'll ask Brandon to come off mute and give just some general thoughts when it's time. He went through the interview process with her. And then I think if we feel comfortable after hearing his synopsis voting, we can invite the parent member to our next meeting.
Okay, I'm going to take us off. Well, first we'll have someone vote to move into closed section, and then I'll take us off of live broadcast.
Is there a motion to move into closed session, excuse me?
This is Katie. I move to closed session.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.